Good morning. This is Belfast, very busy, Stranmillis Road, students walking up and down, and this is the Friar's Bush ancient cemetery on Stranmillis Road, and you've probably walked past this or driven past this and never thought what's behind the walls. And this is all the information board stuff about the cemetery. It has an ancient pedigree, and you can pause that and read it for yourself. These entrance houses are date from 1850s, so Adrianne tells me.
And he wrote songs and ballads
That's the
about the Irish struggle in the South.
Ashby Institute.
Sorry?
No, I'm gibbering to myself.
You get tablets for that,
And this is the Ulster Museum.
And part of the reason why Friar's Bush is called as it is because of this hawthorn tree here behind us. It's a very, very old site. It dates back on old maps of the city, way back into the 1300s. On the old maps, it has gone under various names. It's been known as Ballynabracker, which means place of the brothers. It's also mentioned as being called Friarstone, which is a corruption of Friar's Town. And on one map in particular, it's also listed as Capella de Kilpatrick, which means Church of Patrick, Very, very tenuous connection to St. Patrick, and St. Patrick's patron saint of Ireland. And if St. Patrick was everywhere he was supposed to have been, there wouldn't have been a square inch of land that he hadn't put a foot on. This, everybody wants to latch on to the patron saint. But to say, if we're to believe everything about St. Patrick, there wasn't a square inch of Ireland that he didn't touch.
And he drank Guinness.
And he drank Guinness with a snake round his neck.
That's right.
And told the rest to go away.
Oh dear.
But as I say, so it's gone under three various names, and as I say, its current name is Friar's Bush because of this. Now, the reason they think there's some sort of religious worship on site at that point is on the map there's three little circles that may represent some sort of dwelling. Never a church, as far as the scholars know. In 1691, the English Crown brought in what was known as the Penal laws, and they were in existence right up until around about 1798 or thereabouts. And what that did, it put terrible restrictions on the Catholic population.
Friar's Bush was one of the mass stations whenever Catholics couldn't worship in public.
And so the legend goes that the priest came on the Sunday, and as he was finishing off and dismissing the congregation, a member of Chichester's militia shot him from the road and killed him. And the story goes that the congregation buried the priest at the base of the hill here, and on his grave sprung up the thorn tree, hence the Friar's Bush.
The cemetery itself is about 2 acres, and it was this land was given over for a cemetery by the Donegals, who were associated with the Chichesters. And the Donegals lived in Ormeau Park, so they were bigwigs about this time. 1717.
Yes.
Oldest grave, right?
The oldest grave.
That we know of.
That we know of.
Any particular reason for that sort of... Yeah.
The sigil, we think, is a guild marker, which would indicate whatever Thomas's trade was. Now, as you can see, there's like a pair of sheep shears, for the want of a better word.
Right,
or
right.
Or maybe cloth shears.
Yes, yes,
You
yes.
think this may be
Rope.
a representation of a cabled rope.
Yes.
And at some point there's been some sort of metal disc here, because there's little holes here for screws. So
sort of a wee plaque.
So we think there might have been like a donut-shaped disc or something here.
Right.
Those that have done some research on the cemetery have gone through all the guild books and dating back to that period, and there's no guild markers that have this combination.
And this headstone dates from the 1800s, and look at the craftsmanship involved in this Celtic cross. I don't know if that's coming up for you.
Would have been interred, those coming from the poorhouse and so on, or without means to buy a grave. The city obviously had a responsibility.
This is the poor ground, so the
they
paupers were all in here.
This area is known locally as Plaguey Hill, and the reason for that being that twice it has been used, well, two main occasions. In 1832 and in 1847 was used to inter victims of outbreaks of disease. In 1832 there was a very serious outbreak of cholera. In fact, all over Europe during that period cholera was rife, you know, right through England, into France, Germany, Holland, and right across. And so it wasn't just sort of here, but the cholera victims had to be put somewhere. So Friar's Bush, being still very much on the outskirts of the city at that time, or the town, was the ideal spot. And this floor part of the mound is where the victims from the cholera epidemic were interred. It's also part of the reason why the Stranmillis Road, the other side of the wall here, is narrow still at this point. The feeling was that if they widened the road here, they would break into the ground and release cholera.
Right.
Now, whether there's any sort of real scientific basis in that, I'm not quite sure. Yes, cholera does exist in the groundwater, but at that point, who's to say it would still be active? I don't know.
They didn't want to take the chance.
But they weren't taking a chance. I would say there was also certain bureaucratic things at stake as well, because you would have had to move the wall.
Yeah.
The consecration of the ground, there would have had to been
yes, all sorts of ramifications. Yeah.
And obviously the graves would have had to be moved and so on. So logistically it would have been a very big task, a very expensive one. So I think they were quite happy to say,
And Adrianne's telling us that cholera victims were placed in here, yes, by the dozen, and the potato famine victims were placed in here by the dozen, and also dysentery victims were placed in here. And the population of Ireland as a whole plummeted from 6 million people down to 2 million people at that time in the mid-1800s. Not all of them died, obviously. A lot of them emigrated to America, etc. But that was a lot of them did die, and that gives rise to the old saying, bring out your dead. People were dying. Belfast at one stage had 80,000 people living in it, and over a period of time, a tenth of those people died. 8,000 people due to cholera and dysentery.
When you find out the real truth, you think, well, yeah, I can understand why. It looked healthy enough when they were harvested, but they very quickly succumbed to a mold and basically became lumpy, messy black slime.
Victims of the potato famine were also buried in here in the 1840s, whenever the potato crop totally failed over a number of years, and people just starved to death.
The ones that first seen it, they got excited as well. So
485 AD.
the scholars at the time got very, very excited about this stone. If you remember when I said about the names that have been listed on the older maps, the Capella dei Patrick, and they went, oh, this puts it all in the ballpark. There must have been Patrick's church here, yeah.
Right.
They all got excited. And then they had a little read of the inscription. And what it says is, say very, very faded now, it says, here lies the body of the priest. But the big kicker is the inscription's in English.
Should have been in Gaelic.
It should have been in Latin.
Latin.
Go back to that time.
Right.
Or some sort of organ, some sort of Irish script or whatever.
So what's this about?
This is the fake stone.
The fake stone?
It's a practical joke. It was put in the 1800s.
Right.
And they think it can be attributed to a man called Francis Joseph Bigger. He was a solicitor, and he was a historian and an antiquarian, but apparently he's a terrible practical joker.
Oh dear.
Right? So, and what he would do was he would go around old sites like this, and he would put something in that looked almost right. And then he would watch as they got all excited about whatever it was he was trying to fake up.
Prankster.
He was a bit of a prankster, yeah. But what he was clever. He put it beside this one.
Yes.
And this is the oldest stone on site. It's not a grave marker. What they think it is part of one of the original structures that was on site that shows up in the maps going back to the 1300s. On this side of it, there's like a socket, an indent. If you just want to come around, you can see it. So they think it might have been part of the structure where a beam would have went in to support something.
Yes.
Whether an altar table or a rafter or something, whatever. I'm not quite sure how far down this stone goes. Nobody's ever had a look, so we don't touch. Some people say it's asked for holy water, but you wouldn't be able to keep water in there. Also, and Kevin Buggy was another newspaper man. So we've had McKenna, and we went past Daniel Reid's grave there, just down beside Barney Hughes. Daniel Reid was another newspaper owner. The Belfast Morning News, which then became the Newsletter, and one of the very long-established newspapers in Belfast. What's your bramble?
I will.
So, Kevin Buggy, he was the editor of a newspaper called The Vindicator, and The Vindicator was basically a Republican newspaper, so it very much espoused the ideals of a free Ireland and so on. Buggy was a great supporter of Daniel O'Connell. I have to be careful when I say it because I usually say Daniel O'Donnell and I just get this image in my head that makes me want to giggle. Daniel O'Connell. So he would reproduce O'Connell's speeches in The Vindicator, and have you ever read any of O'Connell's speeches? When somebody says you could talk for Ireland, this man could, and he did. And fabulous orator, really whipped the crowd up, passionate, and for a cause that a lot of people believed in. And as you can see along the top here, it says, erected by the Repealers of Belfast. Now, the Repealers were a group of people who basically wanted to repeal the Act of Union, which means Jesus, Saviour of Man.
The I-N-S or
I-H-S.
I-H-S.
In the Greek and Latin, there was no J, so when you had a J, they substituted an I.
So it's Jesus?
It's Jesus, Saviour of Man.
Man, and it comes from the Greek, and it would be associated with the Jesuits?
More or less from what I've been told.
Right, okay.
I'm not Catholic, so I can't swear to that, but
right.
Those have told me you see it more on those who would possibly have followed.
I noticed it further back there as well.
Yeah, you'll see it on quite a few of them.
This is an Irish ewe, and Irish ewes are all female, so they cannot be propagated from seed. They are propagated from cuttings, and the original mother of all Irish ewes is down in Florence Court. So this ewe here was propagated from a cutting, from a cutting, from a cutting, from a cutting. They stand much straighter and they're darker than the normal yew tree.
you know, people were fearful and so on. And because this was now a Catholic cemetery from 1828 onwards, it sort of became the focus of any sort of constant unrest in terms of what the protest. And they would come up here and they would riot out on the road, sometimes within the grounds. And they think that Andrew lost his head during that period. It got knocked off and taken away, and he's been without his head ever since. But,
Andrew the Headless Man.
yeah, he was a newspaper man. The ironic thing about the penal laws and these professions that were prescribed to Catholics, journalism wasn't one of the ones that was outlawed, and you would think that if anybody had influence at all, it would be editors and journalists. But I suppose back then, not too many people could read and write, so they probably never thought it was going to be much of a threat.
The reason that Andrew McKenna has no head here is because Protestant vandals away back in the 1800s actually come in and took his head off. They didn't like anything Catholic about the place. So there you go.
There's about 17 different lavery plots through the
My
cemetery.
goodness, 17!
They're our best customers. As about a year back, I was talking to Dan Lavery, who's one of the older generation of laveries, and he was coming in to see these graves that they got sort of done up. They were in very, very bad state. As you can see here, Rose Bridget Lavery died 2013. So they come up, what they wanted to do was to inter the ashes in the grave, and they saw the condition of the thing, and they were horrified just how bad it was. So they got a stonemason in, and they cleaned these graves up, did a beautiful, beautiful job on them. They look a bit strange, they sort of stick out like sore thumbs among all this stuff. But nature will soon work it out, and a wee bit of moss growing on it and everything else, that will soon blend in again.
So this is called Publican's
Corner.
Publican's Corner, right?
Say, because quite a lot of the graves along here are from those that would have been in the bar trade.
Right. Okay. You'll notice in this grave here that the metal has been removed, cut off, and you find this quite a bit, even in streets and houses where railings should have been. These were cut off, and the metal was given for the Second World War effort. These railings here were preserved because the families came up and stood in front of the grave and said, "You're not having those." But these ones here have been removed, and obviously their families were all dead.
Mark, Luke and John, and various elements of Christ's life depicted down. But what is curiously interesting, this is the Jordan Cross, so this just down past us here, just along the coast, Jordanstown. Jordan owned all the land there, the University of Ulster have got their main campus down there and so on, and it's just before you get to Carrickfergus. But Jordans were a very well landed and very wealthy family. I'm going to say this is the Jordan plot. But what is interesting about this, and hopefully I won't fall down one of the holes that I know's in here. See here?
Yes, yes.
Fossils. Oh. Yep. So, to say here, definitely evidence of fossils. And Jerry there that was walking his little dog there, a bit earlier, that lives in the Gate Lodge, he had a stonemason in one day, and they were walking past this, and the stonemason stopped. And he said, "Do you know what you have there?" And Jerry said, "Jordan Cross, you know, it's lovely." He says, no, come here, do you see this? And the stonemason pointed out the fossils. And he says, "I can tell you the quarry that came from." He says, "Because all the stone that comes out of it is full of fossils, and everywhere I see it, I know it's from this particular quarry in, where did he say? Killarney or somewhere like that. Somewhere far away anyway, the stone came from. And the stonemason had worked with it himself, and he says every bit that comes out has this fossilization in it, and when he goes to the graveyard, he goes, "There's another one, there's another one, there's another one." But Jerry said he passed it so many times and looked at it so many times, and myself too, when I first started coming up in here. I mean, as I say, I just like looking at the workmanship in it, until the fossils were pointed out to me. They didn't even register, but now that I see them, you know, you can't, it's the first thing your eye goes to now.
Yeah. Hi folks, back again. I'm up in the Ulster Museum, and I knew that this overhead view was available because I used to come up to the wee shop, the wee tea shop up here, and this is a view down into Friar's Bush Cemetery. And I know the sun's not good on the old lens here, but nevertheless I think it's worthwhile shooting a wee video of it. Some of these graves date from the 1700s. Along with Clifton Street Cemetery, this is probably one of the, if not the oldest cemetery in the whole of Northern Ireland. So there you go. Come for a wee visit, a wee walk round, and Adrianne from Botanic Gardens will show you round.